Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Ed Dombrowski, Chairman of the Town Council, and I'm joined here by with one of my colleagues, Councilor Jonathan Shines, as well as a number of the members of our different departments here, DPW, Town Administrator Mayo, our Communications Manager, Jen McDonald, and thank you, everyone who came out this evening for this meeting. This is the Envision Wakefield Downtown Revitalization update, and we have some really exciting updates to provide to everyone this evening, both watching and those in attendance here. Before I turn the floor over to VHB, our design firm that will give you a little bit more detailed picture of timelines and the like, a few things I wanted to mention to you from the town perspective. This evening tonight is another opportunity for the community to offer input, suggestions, and ideas to our design team here, VHB. We are now at a unique point in that the design that we had, the concept that we had come up with after many different public forums and much public input was presented before Mass Department of Transportation to get some preliminary approvals. And again, this is approval of concept. These are not specific designs that have been approved because that continues to be a work in progress. But it's significant, and it's significant for a number of reasons, some of which I wanted to highlight for everyone this evening. One is the scope of the project. This project was submitted by our design team, VHB, and it was estimated at, I believe, engineering costs all in about $17,500,000 or thereabouts. Then the Department of Transportation does a further analysis and makes determinations on things like the police presence that we need to have, a lot of the other elements to the project itself, and then they come up with their preliminary estimate of the total design costs, because they want to be or the total cost of the project. MassDOT wants to be sure that whatever amount they come up with sufficiently funds the project that has been receiving this preliminary approval. So MassDOT ended up coming up with a number of approximately $26 million. So in total, MassDOT estimates this to be an approximate $26 million project. The totality of the different components, the engineering elements, the MassDOT time, having the police there, throughout the project, that totaled about $22 million and change. They also built in inflation because this undoubtedly will be a project that will take a number of years probably to get to full completion, although we hope to accelerate that. That being said, they figure in inflation as well, so that 26 million figure is their projected out figure. But what is really interesting and nice about this project is the fact that MassDOT at first blush approved a project of this size and magnitude. And I'll turn over in a few moments to VHB, who can talk about how that compares with some other communities, but it's not common for MassDOT to approve a project in that amount of that scale at first blush. Instead, they often will go through and suggest maybe breaking up the project into several pieces and treating them as separate projects. Not the case here. I know that VHB has been involved with a number of projects that have been above $10 million, but $26 million really sets us really far apart from most of our other neighboring towns and communities. So that's a really positive thing, and I think it speaks to the credibility of the concepts that were created with community input. I think it speaks to opportunities that we have to really improve things like safety, multimodal transportation, and a lot of other improvements that will benefit us both from a safety perspective, but also economically within our downtown, not to mention the aesthetics, obviously, that come along with it. I should also point out that there are some other, I'll call them successes or wins, that we have as a community versus a lot of other communities that go through this process. One of them is we were able to preserve segments of angled parking in this design that we have, this concept. And VHB can speak to this point, but there are certain design standards that MassDOT requires relative to angled parking. And many of you who have attended prior sessions may recall we have that pinch point, Middle Main, that just makes it very difficult to have angled parking without either crossing the double yellow aligned or otherwise causing some potential hazards. Pursuant to MassDOT standards, there are sections of our Main Street that literally don't have enough feet across. Even if we removed the sidewalks in their entirety and went building to building, we still wouldn't be aligned with what the standards require. That being said, we are able to maintain angled parking in certain areas on Main Street, which is something that I know was important to a lot of residents, and it was an important piece of feedback that we received, and we're excited about the fact that that has made its way through the initial approval process through MassDOT. Another issue that came out of a lot of these discussions that we've had as a community is the expansion of the project. And you may recall that we are now expanding the project down onto Spalding Street and Lake Avenue. That is something that, although presented by VHB, was not a sure thing that it would be included as a part of this project or be included at all. And so the fact that we're able to have that expansion, again, that expansion was driven by a lot of our resident feedback, is a really significant step for us as well, and it just further enhances the overall project that we're looking at. Another aspect that came out of the community discussions we had revolved around the rockery. We're able to not only maintain the rockery, but actually enhance it so that we can make it more usable, more accessible, and really make it more of a feature of our downtown area. I know there had been a lot of discussion around the rockery. There had been some strong community feedback relative to that. So not only are we preserving the rockery, we're actually enhancing it and making it more accessible and user-friendly, which is another great development for us. As far as where we go from here, you'll have some, VHB will describe to you some of the next steps, but one thing that anyone who may have tuned into our recent town council meeting is aware of is we recently received a grant from the Complete Streets program through the state. This was a grant of $378,000, and proud to show our certificate of funding here that we received relative to that, $378,571. And what's especially great about that is the fact that we're now able to use those funds to tackle Albion Street earlier than anticipated. And so Albion Street in some ways will become like a prototype or a model that we'll be able to use. We'll try a number of different finishes. We're going to try a number of different elements that we would like to presumably have introduced into the Main Street corridor. But it gives us the opportunity now to test them out. It'll give the community a sense of the look and the feel. It'll improve safety on Albion Street. It'll make it a more inviting economic corridor for us. And it's something we're able to do in very short order. So with the funding that we received through Complete Streets, and I want to acknowledge our town administrator, Mr. Mayo. Mr. Mayo and I have been meeting with the Secretary of Housing and Economic Development for the state. We've brought them out here to Wakefield. We've toured them around. We've discussed this project a number of times, and now we're fortunate to have this funding, which is a really good opportunity for us to get a jump start. And in the months to come, and I should say that at this point we're already in the design phase. So that's something we're doing as a town. Our town engineer is working on that in the design phase of a lot of those elements, like the bump outs for crosswalks, where we can plant trees, how we can do some other safety improvements, some other aesthetic improvements. That's going to be helpful because we as a community are able to now look at the palette of materials, and from that palette decide on what we think a look and feel for our community should be, what our downtown should look like. We can then apply that palette of materials to Albion Street and see what we think. We can test it out. We can walk on it, cross it many times, see what we think. It's really test it out, and then we'll see what we like. And anything, if we notice that, hey, there are certain things we can improve upon, we'll do that. And so then when it comes time for the Main Street project in Main Street proper to be done, we'll be able to carry over those elements and make use of them throughout the entire corridor, which again goes from the junction all the way down to Spalding Street to the lake. The $26 million project in total is a daunting number, certainly. The town's commitment is the cost of design. And we've already, at town meeting, we've had 2 separate votes relative to that. So we've had, I believe, $770,000 that's already been allocated by the town towards this design. And I expect we'll have probably 1 more vote relative to a final design element, and that's where our obligation ends. From there, the money comes from technically the federal government. In recent days, you may have heard some discussion of infrastructure and a focus on infrastructure. It's federal dollars that are funneled down through Massachusetts, through the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, and then through what's called the TIPS program, and that's ultimately how the money gets allocated to us. We have a number of opportunities relative to this funding and this project, and in all likelihood, we're expecting over the next several months, optimistically, I'm hoping for 4. You may hear a number of 6, but over those next 4 to 6 months, our design team here through VHB, they're going to be working through a lot of the specifics of design. And taking the concept and taking it to the next step to make sure everything is feasible from a design perspective. That's 3D renderings and imaging and the like. And from there, we'll be at a point where we'll then be able to reconvene as a community, look at the designs based upon what the parameters are that have been determined, and then offer further feedback and input. But tonight is another opportunity to do that. So if there are particular elements or aspects to anything that you've heard of or participated in previously and want to have VHB consider that as they're working through these designs, this is your opportunity. Again, this is a very fluid process. The approval that we had from Mass Department of Transportation was really the framework or the bones of this project. There are not concrete plans that have been signed off on, but there are certain structural elements that we need to make sure we adhere to in order to make sure that we have the funding provided to us and get the project completed. On that, I should also point out that while we're able to really have Albion Street, that corridor between Main Street and North Avenue, as a standalone project in some respects, and it will be a model again for the grander project, once we have that design in place, once we know exactly what we're looking at, we can then peel off that design. So we can actually take it in segments. So we could tackle like one area, then tackle the next, then another. We have a lot of flexibility relative to that. We're very cognizant of businesses and not interrupting their operations. We're very cognizant of traffic and making sure that traffic is duly considered as a part of all of this. But we have a lot of flexibility relative to how we would then phase in this project to make sure that it's least disruptive but most impactful. I think we're all very anxious and ready for the downtown to be, to have this facelift, and this is really going to be an opportunity where we'll have a lot of control over that. Something else I should point out just in closing is the amount of funding that is available through the state is a somewhat competitive process. So part of what our job is as the Wakefield delegation, I'll call it, is to work with the regional committees that then put us on a list and then move us on that list. And having just been at a conference with my colleagues recently, the most important thing is to be shovel ready. So if we can be shovel ready, then that means that we'll be able to fast track our project ahead of those that might be above us on the list but aren't yet shovel ready. And the last thing that the Commonwealth wants to do is have to return federal monies back to the federal government to be allocated to another state. So they are looking for projects that are shovel ready. That's why we've been so deliberate in our approach thus far to have this design as we do, this whole process, the community input to the extent we've had it, because it's important that we do all the things in proper order so that when that design is completed, when we go through all the phasing that VHB will talk about in terms of 25% design and beyond, we'll be able to present and say, we're ready to go. So if we can peel off part of the project and be ready for it, we can slot in above some other communities that may have a higher place on the list but aren't ready. And that's a really important piece of this, because ultimately that's going to expedite this project the best way that we can. So with that, I'd like to take a moment to introduce I guess now familiar faces here to us here in Wakefield. We have Patricia Domigan and Jeffrey Morrison Logan, and I'll turn it over to them. They'll give you some updates relative to where the project stands and some of the timelines we're looking at going forward. And then both they and the town are here to answer questions for you. I want to make sure if you have any questions, any thoughts, any ideas, this is your time to engage with us. We want to have this as interactive as possible so that we come up with a plan and a design that is designed by us for us. So with that, I'll turn it over to Patricia and Jeffrey. Thank you.
That better? Good evening. As Mr. Dombrowski had said, my name is Trish Domigan. I'm the project manager on this project from VHB, and this is just a project update. Get any feedback. If you guys have thought about anything over the last couple of months since the last time we presented, we'd be happy to hear about it and explain some things that you might have questions on. As had mentioned, the project limits, they had been revised. They actually include Lake and Spalding Street, Main Street, Water Street, and also Albion Street. Even though it's going to be done as a first phase, we are going to need feedback. We want to get your input on material selection, on sidewalks, and what you want to see for lighting and plantings, things like that. Also included, it's the same project limits as what we had shown before. It's also going to include the Water Street parking lot. The vision has always been the same. It's, really making this a destination. We want to make sure that even though people are driving through Main Street and on the other surrounding roadways, that it's a safe condition for those people that are passing by, but also the people that are visiting Wakefield. One of the biggest objectives and what we've heard is, we want to make sure that it's a walkable community that people can get from the Galvin School and the new bike path that's going in adjacent to the Galvin School all the way up to the downtown area and enjoy the amenities that you guys have in Wakefield. It's a beautiful town. We want to make sure that people can actually come and get to it safely in all modes of transportation. Not just vehicle, not just pedestrians, but also cyclists and also buses. People navigate around with the bus routes that are around on Main Street and Albion Street. This is just some of the pictures that we've been showing throughout, some of the substandard conditions that are here. This is from last year where you can see what people that are parking in the crosswalk locations. And I want to point out, because there's been a lot of concerns about, the width of Main Street and where the pedestrians are crossing is there are a high amount of accidents that are occurring on Main Street. There was just one a couple weeks ago, is that right, that a pedestrian got hit by a vehicle at the intersection of Main Street with Water Street. So those things are very serious, and we want to make sure that we address those issues as we move forward with the design development. You can also see from these pictures that, some of the materials are tired. When they were first installed, they looked beautiful. They were absolutely fabulous, and now it's time to actually replace them with more fabulous things. That they've lasted through a life cycle, and now they need a new life. So we went through a public process over from November of 2018 through last year to town meeting, which was in November. We went through a public process that was a pretty hefty public process. There were monthly stakeholder meetings. We had public meetings, I'd say, every 6 weeks or so. The town has a wonderful communications point of contact, Jen McDonald, who actually did all of the, don't blush, all of the social media, and she helped out as much as she could. It was just a terrific job of messaging the project and actually making sure that the information was out there, that anything that was discussed in public meetings, the videos that we showed was actually posted on the website, the town website, and they're still posted on the town website, right? So if there's anything that you'd like to see that had been presented in the past, they're still up there for people to take a look at. We had a survey that was on the website that we got some feedback on if people didn't want to speak at a public forum, which might have been a few people, but we got a lot of feedback in the public meetings. But, you know, we got some written narrative also on some of the things, some of the concerns with the design development, the concept plans that we had presented, but also, you know, some thoughts that people had on making things better. And it was great. It was a great process. We really enjoyed the process because we could get all of the information. People weren't shy. They wanted to give us what they thought would be a great vision for the downtown area of Wakefield. So you got approved. Congratulations. That's so fantastic. So MassDOT, we met with them a few times. We talked to them about some of the design components that we had to use as part of the project. And it's so fantastic because they were really engaged with the project too. We met with them. We got some guidance. We worked with them on what they wanted to see for the different modes of operation throughout the downtown area. There were what's called roadside safety audits, which means that at high accident locations, people went out in the field and they actually brainstormed to see what improvements need to happen to reduce the amount of crashes or the potential for future crashes at certain locations. So the approval came in December. And what that means is that the work that you guys did, we were just the facilitators. What you did as a community was amenable, and it met the criteria that MassDOT had to allow for federal funding for this project. What Mr. Dombrowski had mentioned was it's federal dollars. So for the construction costs, is about 80% that the feds are going to participate in, and then there's a 20% match for the state. So the construction cost is going to be either paid for by state agencies or federal agencies. So it's great. Congratulations. It's great news. $26 million have been approved. We estimated $16 million for the engineer's estimate. That was inflated a little bit just because when you do construction costs, we do it based on historic data. And what MassDOT does is they actually escalate it over the next couple of years because they want to make sure that the construction costs have some inflation embedded in it. Because, you know, a cost, I'll get a little nerdy here, but a cost of a catch basin right now is going to be a little bit different than a cost of a catch basin in 5 years. So they want to make sure that that inflation is included in an engineer's estimate. There are a lot of contingencies. So what MassDOT does is percent of the construction cost for things like their overhead. They'll be doing the resident engineering, so they'll be overseeing the construction of the project. The contractor is going to be doing the work, and then the MassDOT, Department of Transportation Highway Division, will be providing the administration through construction. So they're going to be overseeing it. So they add those contingencies in. They want to make sure those funding mechanisms, the amount of money they need to oversee the project, is included with what had been approved. Any utility relocations? Utility relocations, like if a utility pole has to get moved, on Water Street you have utility poles. If it has to get moved a little bit because of sidewalk reconstruction, that number is also included in here. So any cost associated with that. If the town wants to upgrade water lines and some, like the sewer line, things like that, that would be something that is not, MassDOT doesn't think that's included as part of a transportation project. So that would be something that the town would have to pay for through construction. As had been noted before, the project has been approved as a whole. The last project that I got approved that was of significant size, MassDOT suggested that it was actually broken into smaller sections. And they could have easily have done this with the three primary roadways of Main Street, Albion Street, and Water Street. They could have said, build Water Street separately from Main Street, build Albion Street separately from Main Street, but they didn't. They approved the project as a whole. Lake Street and Spalding Street, Lake Ave, excuse me. So just to note, those two roadways are considered local roadways. They're neighborhood roadways, and typically MassDOT won't pay for the construction of those because they're not regionally connected to other areas. They're not considered an arterial or a collector roadway. And they did approve the amenities and the improvements on those two roadways. It's pretty significant. It's something it's unusual for MassDOT to go and approve. And some of the work that we're going to be including is, you know, ADA compliance is very important, making sure that people can get to the places that they want to. Universally accessible is very important to what we do. And that's something that we made sure we could do with this project. So this is the concept that had been proposed at town meeting, and it was also submitted as part of the application to MassDOT for funding. And I'm just going to go over it super fast. I think you've seen it before. It's on the website. If you have any questions, we can always flip back to it after the presentation. But starting at North Ave, the roadway is going to get a little bit of a diet, New Year's resolution, little slimming. Have to get on that stationary bike. We're going to reduce the roadway in here. If you actually take a look at it right now, it's pretty wide open. It's not really used very well. There used to be the train that crossed there at an angle. So we're just going to narrow it up. We're actually going to put in some trees and make it more enhanced, more inviting to be at. Linfield Wakefield Bikeway is coming in right near the Galvin School. So we want to make sure that everything is actually brought in at that point so that people can actually enjoy that area, go from Main Street onto the bike path, or go from the bike path onto Main Street to get up to the downtown area. At Galvin, the intersection going into the driveway entrance is going to be enhanced a little bit. And then the roadway itself, we're going to be putting in a median through it just to break up the pavement out there. Like I said, it's a pretty wide section of pavement. People like to use it as 2 lanes even though they're not supposed to. You know, if they have to, they're in a rush, commuting, things like that. We just want to make sure that everyone's paying attention to the rules. One of the things that we put in was a wide separated shared use path along the Galvin side of Main Street, and what that does is it provides bike amenities without having them on the roadway, so that folks that are on the bike path can cross over Main Street and then get on a widened out shared use path section. So as we get up to Water Street, we're enhancing the sidewalk area in front of the buildings here with the Boys and Girls Club. Have they moved yet? So are they moving in there? Maybe? Okay. Where they were is going to, last time I presented. So this section, this area that's right across the street from where we are right now, we're going to be putting in street trees and widening out the sidewalk area, making it a little bit more inviting than what's out there right now. You know, the sidewalks are pretty much broken up. We're going to be replacing all the sidewalks. This area here, instead of the angled parking that's here, we're going to put in parallel parking. One of the things that we heard time and time again is that, especially in the morning commute, people who have to get to Water Street are very impatient. They don't want to wait for the signal, so they have dedicated the parking lane as a right turn lane because there's no one there in the morning, so they can just scoot onto Water Street. And what happens with that is anyone that's parked on Water Street trying to back out of the angled parking on Water Street, and there's someone coming on Main Street trying to make that turn, there's a conflict there. So we're eliminating that conflict. On what the section that we're calling the Middle Main section, so Water Street is down here. The parking lot is getting reconstructed as part of the project. And, you know, the thing that we heard a lot of feedback on last year was the parking and the concern for parking, because some of the angled parking, although we're keeping it as much as we can, that will meet standards, some of it has to go away just because the roadway is just narrow. It doesn't meet, if we had the sidewalk where it is right now, and we try to put in angled parking here, it just doesn't meet what you need for emergency access and making sure that there's a travel lane and then an offset for people to safely back out of. And to note, because I know there's a lot of concern about the parking in here, there were 10 accidents in here over the last 3 years for people backing out of angled parking and either hitting other vehicles or pedestrians. And that's scary. So we just are recommending that this is angled parking. And to offset any of the parking loss that's in here, we're also introducing parking on Princess and Center Street. So that is going to get that is part of the project, and what we're doing is reconstructing those 2 roadways so that, can we take questions after the presentation? Is that okay? I promise I'll go back to the slide. You're welcome. What this is also showing is the angled parking in areas that you do have enough of an offset between the median island that's out there right now and the angled parking in here. The rockery, we're preserving the rockery, we're making it accessible. So we're widening out the island area around the rockery. We heard a lot of feedback that the rockery is endearing to the folks in Wakefield. It's a historic spot of Wakefield. It's known by everyone, even people that don't live in Wakefield. So we wanted to make sure that we maintain it. The one thing that is deficient of the rockery is not only the confusion on the traffic circulation around it, but it's not accessible. So it's a lovely spot. It's kind of cool with the soldier and, you know, the fountain and everything, but people, it's not compliant. So it doesn't have a sidewalk around it. If it has a sidewalk, it's a very narrow sidewalk. The curbing is old and substandard. So what we're doing is we're just enhancing that by improving the landscape area around it and then putting a sidewalk with crosswalks from the park area here over to it so that we can have pedestrians go back and forth. There's going also to be crosswalks from Common Street onto the rockery. So there's people that can actually get to and from the rockery itself. So Lake Street and Spalding Street, Lake Ave, sorry, and Spalding Street, we're going to be reconstructing the roadway and then maximizing the amount of parking that's down on those two roads. And the reason for it is because it's such a popular destination that people who want to use the playground and want to actually walk the lake and have all the other fun things that are happening on the lake, they'll have more parking there. We're also going to widen it out a little bit. So right now you have, I think, angled parking in there. We're putting in perpendicular parking. And because of the type of roadway that's out there, we can have perpendicular parking. We just have to make the roadway a little bit wider. So we're doing that on Lake Ave. On Spalding Street, we're better defining what where the roadway is and where people's yards are up to, because I think a lot of people right now, because of the events that are happening down there, they just park in front of people's houses and onto their lawns, and I think there's a lot of rutting and there's a lot of confusion about where people can park and people can't park, so we're going to better define that. The other thing that we're going to do is put in a cul-de-sac at the end. Right now, I think it's just a T. So we're actually putting in some amenities. So if people can't find parking down here, instead of going into folks' driveways, they'll be able to turn around and then go back out with the way that they came in. Common Street, you've seen that the roadway has been turned into a one-way roadway, so it sounds like that's a great success story in itself. It's been working out very well. There's been additional parking that's been installed there. A lot of people are using it. Some of the concerns that some of the merchants had on the parking in the downtown area is if we had the configuration that's shown on this plan, that there's not going to be a lot of merchant parking. And it sounds like people are actually taking this seriously and parking on Common Street and getting to their businesses. So it's great. It's fantastic that it's working out now. Church Street's going to get reconstructed. The intersection of Salem Street with Main Street, we're going to be just minor geometrics, making sure that people can turn back and forth onto it. We'll be upgrading the signals there also. We're not doing major changes. We're just going to be improving what's out there right now. One thing to note that I didn't note is, and Jeffrey, you can slap my hand for this, so there's going to be a lot of landscaping, gateways, street lights, things like that will need additional input from you, from Wakefield, on what the material is going to be, what the palette's going to be for those materials, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. And by the way, I'm doing all the talking because unfortunately Jeffrey's not feeling very well, so I'm doing most of the talking tonight. I think we just talked about that. So Water Street. Water Street, we're going to be doing some pretty major upgrades. Right now, if you take a look at it, it's a pretty wide open paved area. The sidewalk's a little sad. So we're going to be widening the sidewalk out a little bit so that it's 10 feet wide. So it can be considered if small children want to ride their bike on Water Street, it will be wide enough for them to safely ride their bike on Water Street. We're doing what's called adaptive traffic signals. So we're installing a traffic signal right at the Shaw's driveway area, that signal there. The Vernon Street signal is already going to be installed as part of the bike path, but we are going to be what's called connecting into that. So each of the signals is going to be interconnected, and there's going to be adaptive signals. So it's going to respond to the traffic that's at the signal. It's smart technology. And those two signals are going to be connected to the intersection of Main Street with Water Street and West Water Street. As I mentioned, the parking area is also going to get reconstructed, and then Lincoln, we're just going to be reconstructing it up to the parking lot entrance. One of the things to note, we removed the parking lot entrance onto Water Street. That was a conflict location. And also, if you take a look, if you walk out to the intersection, and if you take a look at the intersection itself, there's a lot of unused pavement out here. There's a pretty wide, you can see the dashed line here, that represents the edge of the pavement. It's kind of at a skew. So what we're cleaning up, we're going to clean it up a little bit, make it more of a traditional intersection with turn lanes and through lanes on Water Street itself. So one thing I wanted to note, which is very exciting, it's already been mentioned, is that not only did the town get approved for the $26 million for Main Street and the Main Street project, they've also gotten approved almost $400,000 to do what's called complete streets amenities on Albion Street, and that will be the first phase of this project. It's really fantastic because it really does demonstrate momentum. It's going to build momentum. It's going to take, you know, we're in this for a little bit of time with Main Street, and this just allows for construction to occur and chip off the first piece. This has been in the planning for a long time, and Albion Street is just a perfect example of what could happen on Main Street with the materials that are going to be selected and some of the features that are going to happen with the bump outs and shorter crossings, because that's, again, another concern, is that people are concerned with crosswalks on all of the roadways, and this is just going to be a perfect example of what it can happen and what the vision will be on Main Street. Oh, and by the way, it's going to be under construction this summer. It's anticipated to be under construction this summer, so it's going to be pretty quick. Since we're already in spring now in February, it's going to be quick. So what we want to talk about are next steps, moving forward from here, just to give you a little bit of a piece of what's going to happen over the next year or so. Over the next month and a half, there will be another public meeting that will facilitate, that will talk about some of the palette of materials that can be selected for these projects. You know, we have to take a look at durability, aesthetics, obviously, you know, what it looks like in terms of what the town wants to see. So what works for the town, what doesn't work for the town, you know, some of the things that we have to put in, like vertical granite curbing, things like that, will be put in, but some of the colors that are out there, some of the different types, like benches or plantings, will be presented to you, and would love your feedback on that. That would be absolutely fantastic. So I think the first public meeting on that will be in March, so that we can actually talk about some of the materials. So just taking a look at some of the design parameters. Am I going, or are you going, or am I still going? Okay. Some of the design parameters that we're considering as we're moving forward, and actually we've talked about this. This is a slide that was presented to you last year also. You know, some of the things that we really want to take a look at and we think about seriously, especially for downtown areas that we're working on. You know, we want to make sure that this is a sense of place. We want to make sure that it's a pedestrian destination, that people can enjoy coming to Wakefield and not just driving through it. We have to meet the funding eligibility criteria, but not only just the eligibility criteria, we have to meet state and federal standards. You know, as engineers, we have to use specific guidelines and standards to make sure that the designs that we are presenting to the town and to any of the agencies that are reviewing this meet federal guidelines. And those guidelines are based on, again, historic data. You know, something works, they're going to put it in a regulation, and that's just something that we work with as engineers on a day-to-day basis. So, you know, like I just used the example of vertical granite curbing, that's a regulation because that works. It's tried and true, and, you know, the data, it backs up the use of granite curbing to protect pedestrians on sidewalks. So things like that we actually have to use. We want to make sure that it's universally accessible. which means that anyone that's using this corridor, be it in wheelchairs or strollers or anyone can use it. So we're making sure that it's always ADA compliant, as we call it. Multimodal travel. One of the new requirements, it's been a requirement for a while, but DOT is getting more stringent, is you have to look at each corridor that they've approved as a multimodal corridor, which means that you have to take into account vehicle circulation, pedestrian circulation, and also cyclist circulation. So that's something that we've taken a look at for this and we've presented to you. We want to make sure, as part of a destination, that you can get to the features of the downtown area. So, the Upper Common and the Rockery, all of the restaurants and the businesses that are along Main Street. It's terrific. You have a vibrant downtown. We want to make sure that we're enhancing it and not making it something that people don't want to go to. You have a great feature with the lake. It's beautiful. It's great to walk around. I know a lot of people run around it, so it's just absolutely fabulous. And the parking itself, we've studied that. We've done some parking studies where we've taken a look at how quickly the parking spaces have turned over. And with the enforcement, with the parking enforcement, it sounds like that's a success story also, that people are actually looking to park, but they're also looking to not park there all day, and they're really paying attention to the hourly restrictions on the parking, which is absolutely fabulous. That just means that there's a lot of circulation, a lot of turnover. There's a lot more people that can go to the businesses and the downtown destinations like the library and the post office and things like that, and people who may be commuting from Wakefield aren't occupying those parking spaces. It's terrific. So with this, I'm going to hand it over to Jeffrey. Are you sure? I can just keep going if you want. Okay. So sympathize with Jeffrey. He has the thing that's going around right now.
Trish makes it sound so bad, right? Well, I'm so delighted to be here tonight because I just wanted to echo all the congratulations, because having worked with many communities just like yours, it's kind of exciting to be at a point in time where I know how hard the entire community has worked through all of the different public meetings. That we really enjoyed having that conversation with you. We've seen all of the different revised plans and thoughts as we've come back over those months. And now you're at the point where you actually can start to advance into the design development of the project and really start to let this whole idea come to life through the different materials and these things. So my part of the presentation is really about what comes next in terms of the process. And in reflecting upon all the great work that you've done, a lot of it has been setting what Ed and Trish called the broader framework, where the cars go, where people park, where the bikes go, on-street parking, and all of those wonderful things that in and of themselves had a lot of upgrades. Now we get to dive in deeper and think about what we call the character, the materiality of how the downtown and the streetscape can come to life. So these are really just a series of images here where we're going to be talking about this over the next series of months with you as the design gets further advanced. So when you think about what happens in the ground plane in terms of the different sets of materials and the options that are there, these images up here are really meant to help us think about what would you like it to be. Clearly, we have to meet some of the standards for accessibility and for some safety issues, but beyond that, there's a lot of choice that the community has about what you want it to look and what you want it to feel like. For example, some of the materials in terms of scored concrete, for example, or brick or imprint, what the bike lanes could look like and the different color palettes that go along the way there. When it gets to areas like in the middle drawing here about some what we call bump out areas or larger streetscape areas, what are some of those amenities that go into those spaces? Because guess what? We've created a whole bunch more of that public space that didn't exist before. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun in terms of defining what those are as well. Oops, sorry, wrong direction. What does it mean in terms of some of the street furniture? So when you walk up and down Main Street, as you get closer to the Common and down to the lake, how do things like street furniture and where those benches are located really reinforce the activities that are both there today, as well as what can happen when the road gets reconstructed with a lot more places for people to walk and dine and be outdoors? And while we may think traditionally about some of the benches that might be out there in some historic main streets that are not uncommon to Wakefield, What might that look like if we maybe start to get a little bit more creative down on the bottom here or in upper left-hand corner, where maybe we bring in different material choices. Maybe there's different ways of having people get seated in different ways and bring in different materials and textures as we go through the heart of downtown as well. What does it mean in terms of simple things like trash and recycling and some of the bike racks that are out here? This is intentionally showing a broad range of that palette, as Ed talked about before, where you are able to bring in different ways of celebrating your identity as the downtown and understanding some things like the iconic maybe footprints of downtown and some of the signage and the lettering and the fonts that go into that. There's very high-tech ways of hiding some of the services behind some of these trash receptacles and recycle bins. What do those look like? What are the colors? What do the palette look like there that really bring the heart of downtown to life? And when you think about celebrating things like sustainability and recycling, many communities are looking at energy that are being captured, photovoltaics, powering some of the recycling and getting those uses to happen. And it's also about accommodating expanded activities for downtown, where the bikes might go, or things like scooters. So you have a way of refreshing all the different modes and celebrating those in different spots here. So a lot to talk about on all of those fronts as well. When it comes to lighting, here again, we have a lot of different things to talk about, from the overhead lighting that might be higher, that talks to the vehicular scale, some of the banners and how those banners can come to life, pedestrian scale lighting as well, and what the tops of these lights look like. There are so many options out there today that one doesn't automatically just have to assume it's one fixture or the other. There's probably hundreds of choices that we can talk through, and how those meet some of your local standards, some of your maintenance standards as well. There's a lot that we're going to be talking about in terms of that. But what's the most important here is how does that really, whatever we pick, how does it really tie into the character and the walkability and the scale of your downtown? We heard so much about making sure this feels like a walkable place here. Those ingredients really can help it feel walkable in the scale. Bollards here off to the right-hand side. Again, many choices there, but could they light up some of the crosswalks to help make them safer at the same time about being a scaled element that people can relate to as well? Excited about having that conversation with you. Then we switch and think about the natural things that are in place today. So while there's many trees out there today, imagine the ability to add more in the palette of streetscape trees and planting and what happens at these kind of bump out areas, really to bring it to life in the color and the palettes of materials. And Kathy, who's here in the corner, if you raise your hand, Kathy, she's part of our landscape architecture team here. I can't tell you how excited she is to start thinking about some of the palette of materials that will be applied through the entire downtown here and what that would mean on a seasonal basis about bringing the community to life through its landscape as well. So what we thought we would do is kind of close with showing you a couple other places that have gone through this transformation. We shared some of these slides at town meeting. I think it was actually a pretty helpful set of slides in showing you some of this transformation. This is some work up in St. Albans in Vermont, and partly why we picked it, there's a lot of very similar ingredients in terms of the scale of the downtown, the angled parking that existed prior that's going to still be there in the future, some of the ingredients about crosswalks and neck downs and lighting and bump outs, all of the things that we just talked about. It's kind of exciting to see the transformation. So spend some time looking at these slides as we go through, noticing things that are just simply painted angled parking here, lack of definition in the materials, pretty bare bones materials as you cross the street. Look at some of the fixtures that happen to be out here today, and look at what the power of some of the materials can do in transforming these places as well. Here's what that same place looks like in the future, where we've actually introduced very intentional differences in some of the material choices to define where the throughput is for pedestrians, enhanced brick areas in here to denote this as a place. Note we put in some of these kind of low granite sitting areas here that really are non-traditional, and also look at some of the plantings that happen around the edges here to really make this feel like somewhat of a protected place, and look at some of the signage and some of the light posts here and how that really brings in the scale as well. And I'm just going to go back to that one time and show you that transformation again. This is what we're going to be talking about as we advance into that 25% design, really getting to that as well. So here's another location, same exact spot here, just turn the corner looking at what's really hard to see in the ground plane where pedestrians are meant to cross this road here, while the bump out exists over in this area, really not that well defined as well. And how really thinking about this at a different time of the evening, how that bump out has really been much better defined in here, brought in to make it more of a place, landscaped around the edges, much better crosswalks that are really much more articulated, even with some warning strips for different levels of accessibility there as well, and really making this into a place. We're so excited about doing very similar things in downtown and Wakefield here through the design that already exists as well. Here's another location about what's out there today. Notice the angled on-street parking that's out here today. Notice they're dealing with also some changes in elevation and some vertical changes here in the granite curbing here as well. So we're looking forward to talking about that with you as well. So I think, Trish, back to you on this slide here. So I can't tell you how excited we are. Congratulations again on getting through this next major step as well. And we're looking forward to coming back in the next couple of months to talk about some of the fun stuff, which is all about streetscape and the palette of materials. So looking forward to that. Trish?
So some of the things that we need to do over the next 6 months or so is to advance the engineering of the concept plan. It really is important that we actually build a corridor that gets your input. We're going to come back and tell you what the status is, but really what we have to do is just really super analyze the corridor design. And what I mean from that is we have to take a look at it from a three-dimensional perspective and make sure that the design that we meets federal standards, but also is buildable. So we want to make sure that it's constructible. Some of the things that we'll be taking a look at, the roadway and intersections, the signal equipment, the signal upgrades that we need, anything that has to happen with any of the intersections, even the unsignalized ones. You know, the intersections of Main Street with all the side streets have to be evaluated to make sure that they're safely signed and make sure that people passing through them are safe. The sidewalks, bike lanes, the signals I had mentioned, the bus stops. Some of the comments that were gotten in feedback is, well, you've moved the bus stops from the intersection of Main Street with Water Street. Where are they going? And that's something that we want to talk to you guys about, and we also want to talk to the people who actually operate the buses. It's not something that we can just place on a plan. We have to evaluate that, where the best locations are, so that the buses do circulate and the amount of users that depend on that bus route can safely get to the bus stop without, making them walk further than they really need to walk. So that's something, as we develop the design, that we'll be talking to the town and also the MBTA on. Loading areas, there's a lot of businesses on Main Street in particular that we want to talk to about, how their operations, how their specific operations work for the businesses, where any of the drivers that have any of the materials that they're selling or using, or the food trucks or things like that, where they actually park, to unload and load up. So those are the things that we'll be talking to the businesses over the next couple months to understand where loading areas need to be for all the businesses, especially on Main Street, but also on Water Street and Albion Street. Streetlights, as Jeffrey had mentioned, that's really important, not only for aesthetics, but also for safety. So, the streetlights that you have out in the median right now, they're really super tall. They're about 20 feet tall or something like that. It's so that it can actually spread light on the entire roadway spectrum. You have a really wide roadway on Main Street right now, and those lights are that high so that the whole roadway can get lit up. It's very intentional, and they're very beautiful. We want to make sure that whatever we're replacing out there is also aesthetically pleasing, but also used for the purpose of what lights need to be used for. The utilities we'll be taking a look at, not only the overheads, but the underground utilities. I think that the town the engineering department's taken an initiative to take a look at the water mains, so we'll be working with them to upgrade the water mains as much as possible as part of this project. And also the signage and pavement markings, not only, like I said, at the intersections, but all through the project, to make sure that people understand, not oversign things. We don't want to oversign things, but we want to make sure that people understand where they're going and what the regulations need to be. So the next steps is to further develop the concept plans that we've presented, and then talk to the town again, and then talk to MassDOT about it to, get some feedback, get some areas that we may be adjusting based on what input that we receive, any of the comments that we receive, and then further design it to a 25%. It sounds very incremental, but it is very incremental. We want to make sure that the dollars that are spent for construction are very efficient. We don't want to design something and then go back and then redesign something that's actually cost more and then have to go back and ask for more money for the construction of this project. So we want to make sure that we are engaging the people that need to be part of the decision-making every step of the way. Once the 25% design development happens, another public meeting, and it's an official state public meeting. It's a little bit different than these neighborhood meetings will occur. And we'll be back here and doing a formal presentation with MassDOT with the project. So one of the things that we'll be needing to do and needing the town's help on is talking to the folks that actually hold the money. So MassDOT approved the money, but someone else holds the money. So the Boston MPO, which is the Metropolitan Planning Organization, actually is the organizer and the organization that actually holds the federal dollars and the projects that are programmed for those federal dollars. So there's a lot of communication that has to happen with the Boston MPO. And the first few meetings, which actually are happening this week, this month and next month, are very important to go and present the project to them so that they have an understanding of the importance of the project to the community also. And also, there's going to be regular updates with town council. They'll be posted on the website. Social media will have updates also. So just a little bit of a timeline over the next year or so. The Albion Street public meeting will be happening in the next month or so, just to get feedback on material selection, how to advance the project into design development. The MPO meeting, they happen on a monthly basis, and they talk about the construction funding for these projects. That will be happening in the spring. We'll be presenting the project. Albion Street construction will be happening spring or summer. I hope this is accurate, Bill. The design input meeting will happen in August. So the 25% design input, that is just when we have enough information that we'll be presenting the design plans to you and get more feedback from you. The plans will be submitted to DOT around September. It'll probably be earlier than that. We'll receive comments. It takes a while for MassDOT to actually go through the plans, and we'll be receiving comments probably at the beginning of next year and have a design public hearing in about this time next year. So with that, thank you. I really appreciate you coming out tonight, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have. Yes, sir. Should I flip back to that plan? Can you go up to the microphone so that people that are watching this on cable can hear you also?
I don't know what happened. Middle Main Street.
If you just hold on a sec, I'm not quite sure what happened to the PowerPoint. We're just going to put it back on the screen again. It's right here. Yep.
So I can't quite
Yep, hold on just for a sec. Okay.
make that out. Are the one-way arrows on Center Street and Princess Street?
Mm-hmm.
Could you give us the rationale for making those one-way in that direction that's shown on that schematic?
Sure. So Center Street is an access route. Oh. I can explain without the plan if that's okay. So we met with the Wakefield Police and Fire Departments, and Crescent Street is a direct route to the other side of the town that they use as an emergency route. So that's the reason why we had Crescent Street going down to Main Street. In terms of, from a safety perspective, it should be reversed. And we can still reverse the circulation of those two streets as we advance it, but it was based on input that we received from the emergency folks in town.
And how would I be able to put input in a meeting with you folks?
You can tell us right now, or we can talk afterwards, or, just, you can give us feedback, you can give the town feedback, however you want to do it.
Okay. I can either meet later or meet right after the meeting.
Okay, sure.
It's not too long.
Okay, super.
Okay. Can you tell how many parking spaces exist now in the whole area of this Envision concept? And how many parking spaces there will be when it's finished?
When we looked at this, and I don't have the I apologize, I have to go back to I can meet with you another time and go through the specific presentation that has the number of parking spaces that are out there now versus how many are going to be there after the construction was actually a public meeting that we had last fall. And what we did was we looked at the parking of the entire area, including all of the side streets, and we looked at when they were occupied and how they were occupied, and what times of day they were occupied, and when the maximum was, when the minimums were. And believe it or not, and this is something that I have to go back to the slides too, you have more parking out there that's on the side streets that are underutilized than you need. So in actuality, you have more parking spaces out there after construction that are available than you do right now. So we've tried to match the amount of existing parking. Is that, do you want, yeah. Match the amount of existing parking to the proposed parking. It's just not in the specific locations where you have proposed parking now. So, for instance, the amount of parking, I don't know what's happening here. The amount of parking that's on Princess Street and Center Street, you only have a handful of parking spaces right now that are on those two streets. But what we're doing is we're building out those two streets to have, I think it's 20 more spaces than what you have right now. So in actuality, yeah, you can see that there's spaces all along here, but right now there's not spaces all along either one of them. So what we're doing is we're building out as much parking as we can to offset perhaps some of the angled parking that is lost in this area. So we're matching it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you for your time tonight. In sort of lining in with what he just said, there wasn't a public meeting this past fall. Maybe it was a meeting with the town officials, but there wasn't a public meeting for us to go to. So I'd be really interested in hearing those numbers. It's very important to see
Sure.
what we're gaining from this project. So if we could have that maybe in a public manner soon, that
Sure.
would be super. I'm very concerned about the Lake Ave and the Spalding and the Rockery area.
Okay.
I know some people who have done some math. We're losing an awful lot of green space, and we really have not had a discussion about the amount of green space we're going to be covering with asphalt. And I hope that's a separate meeting just in that area itself.
Sure,
in
we
the
can talk
future.
about that.
Because mathematically, we're losing a lot of grass.
Okay.
And that might not work for all of us. And in looking at this picture, I had never noticed before the parking lot on Main Street in front of the old bank near Parker Florist. Am I right? There's one entrance now?
This parking lot right here?
No, to the right,
This one?
closer to Water Street. Yeah,
This one.
yeah. One entrance and one exit?
There's one entrance and then an exit on Water Street right
Looks
now.
like there are trees right there, though.
Right.
I know
so
right
what we're
now, yeah. In the future, is
Right.
it-
What we're trying to do for, oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. Let me just get the. What we're doing for the future is we're trying to better manage the access into this parking lot by having it come down on Lincoln Street. The access on Water Street is causing accidents at that location because people aren't really realizing that there's an access spot to the parking area here. They're more focused on the signal so that when people are coming out onto Water Street, there becomes a conflict right there.
So my question is, there's one entrance and one exit.
That's correct.
I'm concerned about that as well.
Okay.
That looks new to me. I don't remember seeing that before.
These are the same plans.
Okay, didn't see I don't remember it. I
Okay.
don't remember it.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, Bob Mitchell, Spalding Street. $26 million is a lot of money coming through the government, through the federal, state, local. And I think common sense would tell us if the issue is parking, which it clearly is not only, for about a tenth of that, we could probably build more parking spaces for our community. But one thing I have to disagree with is on Common Street. That affects me personally. My friend who lives on Common Street has seen emergency vehicles and many other vehicles going the wrong way on Common Street. I know that's going to change over time as people get educated. That's fine. But we do know that one-way streets have a higher rate of travel. Cars go faster on a one-way street. So that's going to increase the speed there. It's also more difficult for emergency vehicles to come to my house on Spalding or to attend to the thousands of people who are in front of my house on a Saturday morning. It's going to take the emergency vehicles longer to get down there. It's also less convenient for people to get down there and get back out if they live, say, perhaps in Greenwood. So I'm not a fan of making Common Street one way. And I would hope people think very deeply about if they want Princess Street and the other street to be one way, especially where that's our critical artery to emergency services. One just general question on statistics and accidents. I know you guys, we probably know how many accidents have been down there. Is there any, or do you have any stats on what would be the projections after TIPS program? I mean, if there are 100 accidents now, do you have any case studies or comps, as we call them, where after the TIPS program there were less than 100 accidents?
I don't have anything on me, but different treatments, yes, have statistics associated. If you install something, then there's a reduction in the potential for crashes at a certain location. Yes, that is correct.
Could somebody verify that for the community?
Sure. Okay,
thank you. And then one last thing. I am hugely opposed to the loss of any green space, especially along Lake Ave. The town has spent millions of dollars over generations prior to ours who are sitting here tonight to own 3 corners of the lake, Hall Park, Spalding, Gertrude Spalding Park, Colonel Connolly, so forth. And we spend lots of money to maintain it, and that's the heart of our community. The thought that this is going to make downtown more walkable and more enticing, that is taking away green space, is in total opposition to that. So I would be very much opposed to that, and I think there are many folks who agree with me on that. And
so just to be clear on
and I don't know the quantity, so please do fill us in on that.
So,
thank you, and that's about it.
The green space on Lake Ave is really where the sidewalk area is right now. So it's not really green space. We're looking to widen this just where where the granite block fences,
Yes.
the granite posts.
Yep, sure
we're not
do.
touching that. So that's actually
None
of that is being changed. That's correct. So
then
that
that's good
park,
information.
the lower common, is staying the same. We're not impacting
Okay.
anything there. We're putting a sidewalk on there, yes, but we're not changing that fencing at all. So there's nothing. There's an existing sidewalk there now, no?
No, there's grass,
Okay.
granite. I live right down. There's grass, granite post, sidewalk, street.
Okay, so we can take a look at it, but if there's any
Yeah.
grass being lost, it's just a sliver. It's not. We're not influencing.
Do you want to
any
pay for it? We've spent millions of dollars of our money. I mean, it's very cavalier of you to say, "Oh, it's only a sliver," but
No,
we'd
no,
like
we
to
can
quantify that.
we can quantify that.
Thank
Sure.
you, and thank you for
Yep.
that. And just real quick, do we know how many bikes go? I'm a big cyclist. Do we know how many bikes go through there now? And this is more for the future. And how many would be projected? I know it's difficult, but
I'll find out if
Okay.
if there's been counts done. I know
Okay.
that there's a lot of races and things. People do bike around the lake.
Yeah.
There's a bike path that's being installed that's going to formalize, access.
right.
With the Wakefield Linfield bikeway that's going in. So I don't know if there's any specific counts that are associated with that. But it's hard when there are facilities being installed right now. It's hard to count the number of users versus when you put the facility in,
Right,
how many
understood.
more users are going to be using it because there's a safe bikeway right in the area. So
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Trish, I might just add in, I think there was a great comment about just questioning where some of that green space goes. I'll use this graphic as a point. While, yeah, we can answer that question along here that is a pretty small piece of land, we get how important it is. I also just want to take the opportunity to point out that we're trying to find other places like in here where we're adding some green space back at the corner, adding some green space back. This whole sliver over in here is a significant win for the community. Up in that corner up in there, for example, over by the Rockery, Trish, if you want, I can't quite reach that far, all the green space there. So maybe we look from the Rockery down towards Lake. I think you actually might find that we're actually putting a fair amount back is the point, too.
Okay, that would be great for you to quantify it, because I don't understand what it is.
Right.
So we totally hear you, but let's show you the full picture as part of that.
That would be great if we saw those numbers. That'd be great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, with that, thank you very much. I really appreciate you guys coming out, and we'll see you next month.